First bill is, I believe we're going to skip to number 2 because I do not see Delegate Feldmark. Delegate Jackson. And Delegate Griffith, I see you here, and we'll probably call you out of order if you have your witnesses here because you are here on time, and I appreciate that. You're looking wonderful and svelte today, by the way, sir. And okay, Delegate, whenever you're ready.
Hello, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and fellow members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Carl Jackson here in support of HB 379. HB 379 is a bill that I introduced at the request of the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation and the Maryland Department of Labor. It does 2 things. First, the first is that it changes the name of the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation to the Office of Financial Regulation. The Commissioner and staff have received feedback from stakeholders that the office's current name is outdated, too lengthy, and proves confusing for consumers. This change will rectify these concerns. The second thing this bill does is establishes an additional Deputy Commissioner position titled the Deputy Commissioner of Non-Depository Activities. The creation of the additional Deputy Commissioner reflects the breadth of the office's regulatory reach and the growth of the non-bank activities. The existing Deputy Commissioner role will be renamed by the Deputy Commissioner for Depository Activities, more accurately reflecting its current role in the OCFR. This bill provides clarification for Marylanders and will help the department to better serve the citizens of Maryland. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir, introduce yourself with your name, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. My name is Tony Salazar. I'm the Commissioner for Financial Regulation. I want to thank Delegate Jackson for introducing this bill because it helps modernize our office. So our office engages in an annual strategic planning effort. And this year, when we did that with stakeholders and advocates, as you heard the delegates say, in each of the groups, they all said that the office needs to modernize its name to bring it up from 1910 to current time so that the consumers and stakeholders will better understand what we do. The renaming achieves a concise and all-encompassing description of the office, makes it simpler for consumers to identify and remember, and it dovetails nicely with our office's mission of being Maryland's Consumer Financial Protection Agency and financial services regulator. So I won't get into the rest. It does add a separate position because our office has 2 sides to it, depository and non-depository. There's no minimal fiscal impact on the bill for the renaming, and we have the non-depository trust fund that will cover the costs associated with the addition of a second Deputy Commissioner. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and also ask for a favorable report.
Thank you both for your presentation. I believe we have, of course, a question. Delegate Arntz.
It's just a quick question. So I'm amazed at the name. We're removing commissioner from something because it was difficult for people to understand.
It dates back to 1910. When you say Office of the Commissioner, it's just clunky. People were like, if you said financial regulation, they would recognize that.
I guess maybe we should really push for financial literacy in our schools then. So
oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm
in favor of that.
Thank you for that abusive question. Next, we have Delegate Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on how you're creating another position with no fiscal impact. Are you basically just renaming the existing position that you already have?
Oh, no, the fiscal impact would be to the non-depository fund. So that fund is comprised of funds that are paid in, and we have budgeted funds.
So there really is a fiscal impact.
Well,
it's not coming out of the general fund. So
it's not coming out of general fund.
What is the amount of that? What do you expect the impact of that position to be?
I believe the pay for that position is around $112,000 to $120,000. It should be a level 24, so plus benefits.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, thank you guys. We'll move on to the next bill hearing. And since Delegate Griffith has been here sitting patiently, he has a very the short list of witnesses. We'll be calling House Bill 27 next. Delegate Griffith.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present my bill today. Chair Wilson. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, and I'm introducing HB 27, Commercial Law, Consumer Protection Act, Floral Wire Services. I'm going to ask a couple of rhetorical questions. First, I assume everybody here just about sent or received flowers yesterday for Valentine's Day. And I assume just about everybody here has a florist in their district. And if that's the case, then I assume just about everybody here has a florist in their district that's about to go out of business. Because that's what we're facing in the state of Maryland across the board. We've had tons of florists go out of business. This bill seeks to bring some relief to our florists. And when a Republican brings a big business regulation bill, there must be a problem. And so that's what this bill is addressing. So this morning, just to make sure my facts were straight once again, I tried to order flowers in a town adjacent to me. And I go online, call the number. It's an individual, and the address on the website, it's a Bel Air address with a Bel Air phone number. I call, somebody from another country picks up, tries to take my order, and I ask, well, I would prefer to do this purchase in person. Where is your location? Oh, the individual says to me directly, well, our location is not allowed to, we don't have the profit certificate yet to allow you to come in to purchase from us directly. This website was terrysflowers.com, represented as a Bel Air business. You can look it up right now, and if you search your town with florists, this one might pop up, and there's a few others like this. And I ask, well, I would like to purchase in person. The person said you can't. I'm like, well, are you subcontracting with a third-party florist? And hung up on me. So what's happening right now, and I've had a number of florists bring this to my attention, and all of them were literally told me they were afraid to testify because of punishment by these wire services. So what happens right now, the big wire services, and some of them do a pretty good job, but there are more bad actors than there are good ones. They spend millions of dollars on search engine optimization, so they dominate the first few pages of the search. So if you search for flowers near your town, right, the first, sometimes few ads or sometimes the first few pages will be these services. If I'm a florist, because they occupy the SEO, for anybody to ever find me, I have to use one of these services. So I have to pay them anywhere from $300 to $600 a month just to be listed on, just for the privilege of using their services through their site to be found. Now, by doing this, I enter an agreement that compels me to sell their product at their price points. And by product, what do I mean? Whatever bouquet they say, I have to sell the same bouquet. I have to use their vases that I have to buy from them. I have to use their teddy bears, I have to buy through them. I have to use their candy that I have to buy through them at their prices. So they're making profit on the product. They're making profit on the sale. I am responsible for the delivery and acquiring the flowers. So if the flowers go higher and eats into my margin, the wire service doesn't care. They still sell it at their rate. And if my margin now becomes $5 for this giant bouquet, they don't care. If I take a loss on this giant bouquet, they don't care. They're collecting the money in the back end. And then it could take them up to 30 days. The contract is 30 days in most cases for them to pay me for that delivery after they've already eaten the fee, the product, all these different margins, right? So now we're up to the point of delivery. So I deliver the flowers, and I say, I've delivered these flowers, these are great. The individual calls back 10 minutes later to the wire service as these flowers weren't delivered properly. The flower service unilaterally decides that, nope, you didn't do a good job, we're not paying you, because they collected the payment. I have a complaint process to the wire service, and if they say, nope, you're out of luck, you're out of luck, you don't get paid. This happened with an individual, florist in my district, where on 3 separate occasions, within 2 weeks of each other, the florist delivered flowers. On the 3rd time, they took a picture. Perfect. It was right on time. 10 minutes later, the individual called back and wanted a refund, was granted a refund. The 4th time the person tried to do this, the florist was like, well, I don't want to deliver this because we know this person is going to rip me off. The wire service said, well, if you don't fulfill this order, then you're breach of contract and we'll replace you with somebody else. And so they're being compelled to do things they're not comfortable with. And it's a huge problem. And then finally, one of the pieces of this bill addresses is the truth in advertising. In many cases, when you go on these sites, you are led to believe that you're purchasing from your local florist. And even if it is a legitimate florist, they will sometimes represent that you're purchasing from that local florist, even though the entire transaction, the point of contact, everything but the execution of the order is being handled by the wire service. So again, what we're trying to do is, this part of the bill is a little vague, so I'm happy for some help from the committee to try to address this, to adopt clear and concise billing practices. Sorry, let me back up a little bit. We want to adopt clear and concise billing practices. We want to make sure that it's very clear the wire services are explaining the strengths and liabilities of their services to these florists. We want to make sure these wire services are disclosing who you're actually buying flowers from, right? That even though you're calling me, this florist would be servicing this and their contact information. We want to regulate a method to submit for charge disputes where the wire service just can unilaterally decide that, well, this wasn't done right and you're out your money, we're going to keep it. And we want to make sure that all payments to third-party vendors are made within 15 days, not 30 days, because if you're a small business struggling, operating in the business version of paycheck to paycheck, that you're getting paid in a timely fashion, because these businesses certainly have the opportunity to do that, and we're certainly very concerned for that. The only testimony that was submitted was by the Attorney General. There was this informational. They said first that they would need one half person to manage this. Well, first and foremost, I would hate to be the half of person that has to cover this. It sounds very, very painful. The second portion of that is my understanding, they're being assigned another 47 people right now to the Attorney General's office. I certainly assume they can be able to carve out a half a person to handle these disputes. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, I guess for some points of clarity. So if I call right now to order, and if I'm a gentleman that wants to do local business, what you're telling me is that I may not actually be engaging with my local business, correct?
That's correct. And to that point, I think all of us want to support local business. And as long as the price disparity is not egregious, we're going to support our local business. If the price is the same, I'm going to my local business before Walmart. In these cases, you feel like you're going to your local business when you're actually going to Walmart and being unaware. And
they never tell you that. Okay. Well, I'll say that I've gotten multiple complaints over the years from different florists in my community about just this issue. So I appreciate you bringing this up. I noticed it was not cross-filed, correct?
Correct.
So it sounds like it's going to be a heavy lift, even if we can make it out of this committee and out of the House to try and get the Senate to comprehend, correct? Okay. Well, thank you very much for addressing this. Like I said, I've heard this for years, so I appreciate you addressing this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I believe next we have Delegate Feldmark, House Bill 396.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Jessica Feldmark, and it is my pleasure to present House Bill 396, the Free Filing Act. So this bill would prohibit tax preparers or tax preparation software from charging a fee for electronic filing of tax documents. The bill does not limit what these businesses can charge for their services or products. They remain free to charge whatever they believe is appropriate and whatever the market will allow. What the Free Filing Act would do is simply restrict how those fees can be structured, specifically that an additional fee cannot be charged for electronic filing. So tax returns that are filed electronically are exponentially more efficient for the state to process. And charging a separate fee serves as a potential disincentive to electronic filing when we should be doing all we can to encourage electronic filing. This bill, like many others, grew out of hearing from a constituent. And when we received our first email on this issue in my office, my chief of staff at the time initially said, well, that's why I never file online. I print it out and mail it in because I refuse to pay that additional fee. So some customers may be perfectly willing to pay the fee, not give it a second thought for the convenience of online filing. But some others, whether it's because of limited resources or simply stubborn principle, will refuse to pay the additional fee and end up filing a paper return, creating more work for the comptroller's office. So the comptroller's office was unable to provide specific time or cost estimates associated with processing a single electronic return versus a paper return. But as you might imagine, they mentioned that paper returns require significantly more processing, everything from opening the envelopes and collating pages to scanning documents and data verification. So they did have some aggregated data that we were able to look at, and based on that, we could calculate that on average, a paper return takes the comptroller's office 60 times longer to process than an electronic return. So from a government efficiency standpoint, clearly we should be doing everything we can to encourage electronic filing and remove potential barriers or disincentives to electronic returns. Now, I do want to highlight that I have already submitted an amendment to the committee just changing the effective date of the bill, moving it from October 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. That was at the request of the Maryland Association of CPAs. They were favorable with amendment. It's a perfectly reasonable amendment just to better align with the tax return cycle. So I have already submitted that. And with that, I thank you for your consideration. I respectfully ask for a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Delegate Weibel.
So, no, they could charge whatever fee they want for their service or the software, but not a separate fee for electronic filing. Correct.
Is there some sort of incentive for filers?
An incentive for electronic filers?
Yeah, if they save that much time and effort and money in processing, why wouldn't the comptroller's office offer an incentive to filers for filing electronically?
Well, I guess the one built-in incentive is for those who are anticipating a return, a refund, right, as it gets processed more quickly. But you know, I can't speak to any other incentive structures the comptroller's office might consider.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Jackson.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Delegate, do you know the amounts? What are the usual amounts for the filing fees?
So my understanding is that they range from $5 to $25 in software packages that charge additional amounts. I don't know from an accountant or tax preparer on their individual services.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions. Wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate, but the tax preparers have to pay a fee for filing someone's taxes electronically, so they get charged. And so what you're saying then is that you don't want the tax preparer to, this legislation would say that the tax preparer then cannot spell out in their fee to the person to whose the person whose taxes are being filed, that they can charge whatever fee they want, and they can incorporate the electronic fee in it, but you just can't say that you're charging a fee for the electronic filing.
So, thank you. I think to clarify, the fee that tax preparers get charged is by the software that they're using.
Exactly.
Right, so that software package would also not be able to charge a fee for the electronic filing.
Okay, so then, and last question. So let's say H&R Block has a software package, and, you know, sure, they may have one that's specifically for Maryland, but they prepare it's one company that's all over the country. So just in Maryland, then at this point, they would not be able to charge anyone for using their software to file electronically.
So actually, the state of New York already has similar provisions in place, and I believe other states are also considering. So we would not be the first to venture into that. So any of the large national software companies would already be able to accommodate that based on the New York market.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Delegate, thank you very much. I believe that's all the questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I believe the next bill is Delegate Rogers, House Bill 505. It looks like you have a very large panel. I believe we have Frank Boston.
The last two witnesses are not testifying because I'm
Okay.
here. So
All
Ari
right.
Clout and Kyle Tilden are off.
And who's the other one that's off, sir? Okay, so we have Mr. Frank Boston. We have Kevin Sullivan.
Right here.
Mr. O'Connor.
Right here.
Mr. Goff? Ken Goff? No? Okay. Well, I believe what I'll just have you guys do is introduce yourselves after the presentation of the bill, please, so we can make sure everybody gets taken care of. Go ahead, Delegate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the esteemed Economic Matters Committee. For the record, Delegate Mike Rogers, and I respectfully request a favorable report for House Bill 505. House Bill 505 is asking for a final inspection on all newly installed private elevators. This inspection consists of a comprehensive check on all of the elevator safety functions to make sure that riders are safe when the elevator is running properly, but more importantly, riders are safe when the elevator malfunctions. In the industry, this test is known as final acceptance inspection. This is a one-time inspection of the elevator before turning its use and operations over to the homeowner. This will be the only required inspection of these elevators. We are also asking for registration of these elevators with the Department of Labor, as is the current industry practice in Maryland. This bill will not be a burden on homeowners because the elevator installation company will handle all registration and inspection issues as is current industry practice. Private residence elevators are the only elevators in the state of Maryland that do not receive this important safety inspection. I respectfully request a favorable report of House Bill 505.
Introduce yourself, please, and then go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wilson and Vice Chair Crosby. My name is Kevin Sullivan. I'm a coordinator with the Elevator Industry Work Preservation Fund. The fund's primary mission is to focus on elevator safety for workers and the riding public. I'm an elevator mechanic, and I'm also a qualified elevator inspector. And for the past 23 years, I've been working on elevator safety issues and elevator safety legislation across the United States. First, I want to thank Delegate Rogers for his work on this issue and for becoming one of our strongest advocates for elevator safety. Why are we here? In July of 2021, a 7-year-old boy was crushed in a home elevator accident while on vacation in North Carolina. His parents, sister, and grandparents were all in the house at the time and witnessed this horrible tragedy. Then in August of 2021, a similar accident occurred in Potomac, Maryland. Fortunately, this boy survived. While working on that issue, we found another accident in 2014. A Baltimore resident, Jordan Nelson, he was 10 years old at the time. He was crushed in an accident at a home elevator in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Today, he is paralyzed and nonverbal. Final acceptance is the most important inspection done on an elevator. It is the last look at the equipment before it is turned over to the family. All elevators in the state of Maryland undergo final acceptance except private residence elevators. And I'll say a proper acceptance inspection could have prevented the accidents that I just listed. The most common problem that we see is a gap in the door between the elevator door and the hoistway door. A final acceptance inspection would identify this problem and fix it. That's it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Frank Boston III. I'm here today on behalf of the Elevator Industry Work Preservation Fund, and we strongly support this bill. We thank Delegate Rogers for introducing it. The bill requires a one-time inspection, known as a final acceptance test, as articulated, on newly constructed elevators in single-family residential homes. That's it, one inspection. These tests are performed by state inspectors because they already do this final acceptance test. This is their venue, this is what they sought to keep, and it's their jurisdictions. It's not performed by third parties. So no one up here is making any money from this. It's tested and informed by the state inspectors. The fiscal note, let's talk about that. The fiscal note is about $62,200. It's the revenue coming in from the cost of the test will be about $109,000. The cost of 2 new inspectors at the state, which they said they needed in the fiscal note, is about $179,000. So the offset is $62,000. The actual fee is $62.50 an hour. The state estimates that it's going to take 4 hours. So we're talking $250. I think you're going to hear from the opposition that it's an exorbitant cost. They are getting confused with third-party inspections. This is done by the state. It's a set fee. It's $250. The elevator must be registered 60 days before it's placed into operation. It is important to know that the state said that they can handle this. If you go to the second page of the fiscal note, it says generally, except for the additional inspectors to conduct the inspection, Maryland Department of Labor can handle these requirements with existing resources. We ask for a favor.
Chair Wilson, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Jason Danker. I'm the business representative for the International Union of Elevator Constructors, Local Number 7 in Baltimore. I'm a licensed elevator mechanic in Maryland and a QEI certified inspector with 3 decades of experience in the elevator industry. I performed work installing, modernizing, repairing, maintaining, and testing various conveyances, including traction and hydraulic elevators, escalators, dumbwaiters, platform, and wheelchair lifts. Prior to any commercial elevator being turned over for public use, it must undergo a rigorous test witnessed by a Maryland State Elevator Inspector to ensure it's been installed according to applicable codes. During the acceptance test, the safety devices, mechanisms, and related circuitry are tested for proper operation. For example, the safeties are actuated to make sure they will stop the elevator in the required distance. The brake is tested to ensure that will hold the rated capacity. Stop switches, key switches, and limit switches are all tested. If it's a hydraulic elevator, the valve is tested for proper operating pressures, along with testing the entire hydraulic system. Under current law, residential elevators are not required to undergo any of these tests before being used. Because they hold the same potential hazards as commercial elevators do, Local 7 believes residential elevators should be subjected to the same scrutiny performed during a final acceptance test as all the elevators are. There are numerous instances across the country of fatalities and injuries resulting from accidents on residential elevators, many of which may have been prevented if a final acceptance test had been performed. We believe it's our responsibility and duty to lead this effort to provide the safest possible conveyance for the riding public. As a licensed elevator mechanic with 3 decades of elevator experience, it's my professional opinion this bill is responsible, reasonable, common sense legislation that will provide another layer of safety for your constituents. Thank you, and we ask for a favorable vote on HB 505.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. My name is John J. O'Connor. I am the business manager of IUEC Local 10, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. I've been an elevator constructor for nearly 28 years and have worked in all facets of this industry. Been in construction, maintenance, repair, modernization, as well as testing. Like my friends here have said, commercial elevators are highly regulated. These home lifts aren't regulated at all. There is no regulation at all. I'm hoping that this reasonable legislation will be passed for the safety of these homeowners to be. I've been involved in a lot of the repairs that have been done to some of these that have had accidents on them. I was working for a company, ThyssenKrupp, who actually had a recall on some of these elevators, and it's an easy fix that could have saved the lives of these kids and this life-changing injuries for these kids. I would hope that this legislation would pass. Thank you.
All right, we have one more favorable. Come on up, sir.
Yes, sir. My name's Ken Goff. I've been in the elevator trade since 1986. I've worked all facets of it in the commercial market up until 2005 when I opened up Preferred Elevator Company. I am the owner of Preferred Elevator Company. We concentrate on residential elevators, wheelchair lifts, and stair lifts in the residential market. It's been 18 years. I've installed hundreds of the residential elevators and provide service for even more. And over that time, unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to encounter some very unsafe conditions that could have been corrected if there was an inspection done during the installation. It's sad, but it's true, and naturally, as Preferred Elevator, we get this equipment back in shape. Under current regulations, you know, the law says that you got to be a licensed elevator mechanic to even install elevator. I'm not sure that's even happening on a consistent basis. With the inspection, that could be at least checked, you know? The installer make sure he is carrying a card and wasn't flipping hamburgers a week ago. Inspections will ensure that the company and the manufacturers are installed in accordance to the code. With hydraulic elevators in particular, just going back for years of seeing what happens with the hydraulic elevators, we put test weights on it to the capacity. We set that valve up. You got to record pressures. You got a working pressure. You got a relief pressure where it would bypass. So once it reaches, just say 1,000 pounds, it'll bypass. It won't keep on building. These pressures were not even set from the day of factory. If they were a day of installation, they would be recorded somewhere in the equipment room. So I'm, you know, this, thank you.
I see there are several questions. I do have a question. Gentlemen, currently in Maryland, if you decide that you're going to use Airbnb, i.e. to rent your home out, let's say you have a large home like my vice chair here and you want to rent it out for vacationers, and it has an elevator, would you be required under current law to get it inspected before you started renting it out?
The answer is no. You know, we contemplated adding short-term rentals, as they're called, Airbnbs. But, you know, the will of this committee is tough. So we just wanted to keep it to single-family residential homes. But if the committee wants to add them, you know, we will bow to the will of the committee.
No, we're just curious because a lot of times the accidents you guys are discussing sound like they're from Airbnbs, people visiting with the presumption that the elevator that they're going to be using is safe. And I was just wondering what your thought process was. It sounds like you're explaining it, but that was a concern. I understand, from what I understand about it, you're saying that upon construction, especially if you don't know who's built it, it should be inspected before it's released to the owner, correct?
That's correct. At least to get the one-time final acceptance test done to make sure that the installer is installing it proper, per applicable codes, per the manufacturer specs. That's the least we can do, we think. Right now we have nothing, so we have to start, and we can at least get that initial stamp of approval from a Maryland State Elevator Inspector to say, yes, it's
And
safe.
while we know that St. Mary's County has a plethora of houses with elevators, how many elevators do you think in private homes are built in Maryland a year? I'm sure somebody has some kind
We're
of.
estimating roughly 300, roughly.
Yeah. And the department estimated 450, but in practice, we think it's more around 300. But the numbers from the Department of Labor estimated 450 a year. But the guys who do it see 300.
And who enforces the law to ensure that they were installed by qualified mechanics?
Currently on commercial,
On
residential, as far as, there is an elevator safety review board in the state of Maryland. I don't know who enforces that, to be
So
honest with you.
there's nobody
There is no,
to stop me from putting an elevator in a house, my house as it's being constructed.
if there's no final acceptance test with the state elevator inspector there, then there's no one to verify that process. You're correct.
Thank you.
They have no regulations right now.
Thank you. We have, start, I think, Delegate Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. Does this apply to chairlifts?
No.
Because in the fiscal note, it says that the Maryland Department of Labor estimates the total cost of an inspection to be $1,000 to $2,000 for a chairlift and $3,000 to $4,000 for an elevator. Why would they have that comment in there if we're not trying to also apply to chairlifts?
I think they're giving historical information. This only applies to elevators. I think I read from the same point that you read from, where it says residential elevators, lifts, chair points, which includes elevators, lifts, chair lifts under current defined law, subject to the registration and final acceptance. This bill, as we put it in, applies only to elevators.
So do we inspect chairlifts?
Honestly, I'm not sure. In a commercial setting, I believe they are.
No, we're not talking about commercial, I'm talking about residential.
No.
Nothing's being inspected in residential at all.
Okay.
So we figured at least do the elevators, but again, if it's the will of the committee to include chair lifts and other lifts, it's up, we will follow your lead.
All right, and then the second question, it was stated that the inspection would be performed by state inspectors, and we know that the state doesn't have enough inspectors, so the fiscal note also says that businesses that offer elevator mechanic services may see an increase in business due to new demand from owners of residential elevator units that have the required inspection. So what part of the bill requires the inspections to be performed by state inspectors only?
That's the law. The state inspectors already do all final acceptance tests, which is new installations and modernization. The fiscal note contemplates the new salaries, the fringe benefits, the one-time startup costs, the travel and the ongoing operation expenses, and they said that they need 2 more inspectors.
So
But that cost
So
is,
I'm confused by the fiscal note again then, if they're saying private businesses would see an increase in revenues due to the new demand for inspection services.
this law only requires the state inspectors for the Department of Labor to inspect it one time. There are no other inspections under the test. There are no third-party inspectors who are a part of this legislation because it's a one-time test, which is in the jurisdiction of the State Department of Labor only. Even on commercial buildings and public buildings, the state inspectors do the final acceptance test.
Okay, so I guess this fiscal note is wrong.
I'm not sure what context you're reading it in.
It's on page 2. I read it verbatim.
And to be clear, the fiscal note may also contemplate discovering shortcomings that must be repaired by a private entity. So I'm sure, because again,
Possibly.
I'm very understanding of the bill, understand what the intent is, and I guess that the note writers may have assumed that if you find some shortcomings and they can't pass inspection, at that point, a private elevator company may be called in to provide the repairs.
Whoever installed it is required to fix the
Well, it
problems.
depends on if they were legitimately installed,
Yeah,
like you said.
exactly,
So again,
exactly.
to my understanding from the fiscal note, it is contemplating the repairing of some elevators that may fall short of an inspection. But we don't need to keep talking.
Still a little confusing because they wouldn't see additional revenues, but I see your
Well,
point. Thank you.
again, and we, as we know, we've been here a long time, the fiscal note, the fiscal note writers, they do their best, and sometimes there's a difference, so,
Okay,
thank you.
you.
I'll add though, online, oh,
Again, please wait, there's a question posed, guys.
You can't.
All right. Are you on, Pippi? All right, you can make it shorter than your speech.
Yeah, it's going to be real short. So this bill adds that the state, the Department of Labor, is going to now inspect private elevators in single-family homes.
On the final acceptance test, yes.
one time.
So is that the same entity that also inspects the elevators in this building?
They do the final acceptance test, and then they do the 5-year load test.
Okay.
And
No,
the annuals are done, the annuals are done by a third party.
Third party, I'm not aware of who does the inspections here, but.
Just remember, a lot of delegates have to hit the steps on the way to that vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We had a lot of editorial about the elevators in this building, but we'll leave that alone.
And I will say he asked the question that everybody was thinking. Delegate Adams.
Full disclosure, I've lost 12 pounds this session by walking those. So Delegate Y will ask a question that I think related to, you came to the office and we had some conversation, but you know, I've got experience with construction, home building, and when you get to a final inspection, I imagine this elevator inspection comes at the end of the construction project. I imagine it could get frustrating if you're waiting for all these finals so you can either sell their house, get an occupancy permit. What is your expectation as to how long it's going to take to actually get a inspection called for and then actually have it done? So the point being, I'm thinking about it through the lens of getting the house turned over to a property owner. Would we get hung up waiting weeks and weeks for an inspector to come? Or would you make a suggestion in this bill as to how soon before final inspection that you want the inspection done? Just trying to figure out where this falls in the process.
Generally, I can only speak from the commercial side. Generally, when an elevator is installed, let's say, for example, you arrive on a job site and you unload the truck, you unload the material. From that point forward, the job begins to progress through stages. At a certain stage, you know that you're estimating your completion time. It's which time you would call the state and schedule your inspection at that time. Ken, you may have a little.
Well, it's just mainly, so I get that. What I'm saying is, does this happen at the end of the construction project, or is this happening like after rough framing but before finished carpentry?
Whenever the elevator is ready, so the entire building may not be, again, from the commercial side, the entire building may not be done. The elevator may be inspected as long as the components related specifically to the elevator are done. More to add.
The one thing I want to add is the bill itself says that you have to file for the registration 60 days prior to the completion. So, you know, at that point, it can start the clock of when you can get schedule the inspection with the state.
So the bill actually is prescriptive in that it's saying 60 days before you want us, call us and we'll be there.
Yeah, the bill actually says.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, register 60 days.
Seeing no further questions, I believe that's the favorables. Okay, thank you guys very much for your panel. We have one unfavorable. Dr. No, Robert Enton, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I was Dr. Yes the other day on a bill. But today I am raising concerns about this legislation on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. So a couple points. If you look at the fiscal note, and the fiscal note basically is pretty much the same, and we do our written testimony before we even see the fiscal note. And in our written testimony, which you also have, you'll see that our concern is that for these inspections, it's not just the cost of the inspector. My understanding from my client, and I'm happy to go back and double check with them, and according to the fiscal note, there will be a licensed mechanic present for the inspection. So while the inspection may only cost whatever it is, $62.50, they estimate in the fiscal note that it would be between $1,000 and $4,000 to have the mechanic there. I'm sorry, the fiscal note estimates it'll be between 3,000 and 4,000. Our testimony says between 1,000, I think, and 4,000. So if let's say the fiscal note is correct, and the fiscal note says you have to have this, and it's going to be, let's say it's $3,500 on top of the $6,250. Well, then you're talking about $1,575 is what the cost of this will be. Now, if you have 450 of these homes in the state of Maryland, I think there's an impression out there that these homes are for the wealthy. These elevators are installed in these homes for the wealthy. These elevators are installed in homes mostly for people that have some form of disability or who are elderly. So we are concerned about what the cost will be for this installation. I'm happy to get back to the committee and to the sponsor. I talked to him before the hearing today and just confirm exactly what the cost will be. But our understanding of it is the same as the fiscal note, that it's not the $6,250. If that were the case, I wouldn't be sitting here today. It's the additional cost of having the mechanic who may be a member of a labor union at the inspection, and that's where the additional cost comes, and we think that's a significant increase in the cost of this housing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm obviously from St. Mary's County, so everybody has an elevator and is wealthy, but do we know the percentage breakdown between who's getting the elevators installed for disability versus who are truly the wealthier families?
I'll be happy to try to chase that down for you. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think my question is around similar to what Delegate Crosby mentioned, because if this is truly just for elevators, I'm not as worried about the cost. I've had a house that we have put a lift in for elderly and helping elderly persons. So that's a very different thing. I don't think I have a house that could even accommodate an elevator. So I would wonder about, what we're talking about. I think we're really talking apples and oranges when we talk about elevators and lifts. And so if this is a bill that's, as we heard the sponsor say, only dealing with elevators, then I think when we think about the cost of safety, that may make sense.
Well, let me just say, we've never had this bill before, so it's a little bit of uncharted territory. We haven't had a bill to extend this to residential in the past. We've regulated elevators in the past. I'm just not sure, the examples that were given were, 3 injuries, going back, I guess, to 2021 in 3 states other than the state of Maryland. I've represented the builders for decades, and no one has ever brought before the legislature or before us that this was a problem in residential properties in the past.
Okay, so I guess that may be the question. Do we need this bill? But I think if we do, because we're concerned about safety of persons, and I'm really concerned about the Airbnb piece of it, because I would hate to rent a place and then have something like that happen. I don't know that this cost of, again, the houses that I think that can accommodate an elevator can handle that cost. That's all.
I understand, Delegate Queen.
Delegate Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are we saying we don't care about safety in private residential homes?
I'm sorry, can you talk a little louder, Delegate?
Sure. The question was, are we saying that we aren't concerned about safety in private residential homes? Is that what I just heard you say?
Obviously, builders are concerned about safety in private residential homes. Once again, this has not been on our radar screen in the past as an item that's required legislation or regulation. So it's a little bit of uncharted territory. I just was saying that I'm not aware that it's been a problem. I didn't hear in Maryland. I didn't hear any examples about it being a problem in Maryland. If it is, I understand. I'm as concerned about childhood safety as anybody. Believe me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I do believe that that's all the questions. No. Delegate Harrison, sorry about that.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you were forgetting about me because I'm on the end. Just kidding. So this bill is only talking about new construction.
Right.
We're not talking about anything that is currently installed, which apparently is where the problems have been seen thus far. And so I'm not understanding the concern from what I was reading from the, some of the testimony from the building industry on this, because isn't a life far more worth $171,000 or even $1 million is the number that you ended up coming up with?
Well, I just wanted to call to the committee's attention what the numbers were, both from our examination before the fiscal note came out and what's in the fiscal note, because a big part of the proponent's testimony was this wasn't going to cost anything. I wanted to, number one, to point that out. Number two, this is an inspection that occurs at the time the elevator is installed. I have no idea whether the injuries which they're talking about, which have occurred, were in, in the first year, or were they 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road? Was it new construction? Was it an older home? Once again, it's just not something that's been on the radar screen, and I think if we're going to go ahead and raise the cost of housing by $1.5 million, it's something that we ought to take a look at, because affordable housing is an issue all over the state. That's all.
And I guess I would argue, well, never mind, that's not a question, so I'll just leave it. But I stand with the comment from Delegate Queen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate.
All right, seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we will have House Bill 400, Delegate Kipke. And if you want to bring up both your panelists, I have Emily Gilliland and Brendan McKay.
Just have Brendan and me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Good to be with you all today. House Bill 400, when I was first discussing the issue, I actually thought, I don't think this is a really good idea, until I learned a lot more about something that I really didn't have much information on. And I want to do two things: share with you what the bill does and tell you why the bill is helpful. What House Bill 400 does is it exempts mortgage loans made by community development financial institutions, which is something I didn't know a whole lot about, from certain requirements to verify a borrower's ability to repay. So what it does is, when I got my mortgage for my house, there's a list of criteria that I had to follow that made a lot of sense for me. This bill removes some of that criteria, but only in the area of community development financial institutions. And what they are financial entities that exist exclusively. And I'll bring to your attention something that I put in as testimony. CDFIs in Maryland, if you look at that, they exist exclusively to help underserved communities and low-income communities find economic development tools. And it's not just for residential mortgages, it's for small businesses, it's for economic development. But they do a lot of mortgages, and what happens is the federal government has a fund through the U.S. Treasury where billions of dollars flows through these organizations around the country, including 15 in Maryland. And they put in this fund, this grant money from the federal government, lowers the price lowers the risk in these loans and lowers the capital in these loans, so that people can get a house and build generational wealth that way. There's also an amendment in your packet that I want to bring to your attention that it's a technical amendment that just fixes a technical glitch in the original draft of the bill. House Bill 400 will act as a tool to help expand home ownership to low-income Marylanders all throughout the state, and the 15 CDMIs are located throughout the state of Maryland. There is opposition from the Attorney General's office, which was my gut reaction to the bill. But when you research this subject matter, 43 other states do exactly this, 43. And among these types of loans that are backed by these special entities, they are among the lowest default rates of any mortgages in the country. So with that, I'll conclude and introduce Brendan.
I'd like to thank the committee for considering House Bill 400. My name is Brendan McKay. I'm a mortgage broker. I own McKay Mortgage in Bethesda, Maryland. I've been in the mortgage industry for 15 years, and McKay Mortgage will celebrate its 6th anniversary this year. House Bill 400 brings Maryland in line with federal statutes already in existence. The only reason I believe this exemption does not exist is because Maryland was more proactive in writing ability to repay rules than the federal government was. The CFPB wrote them in 2013. Maryland had already done it in 2011. Federal government was asked for this exemption or brought to their attention. I imagine the same thing did not happen in Maryland. As Delegate Kipke mentioned, there's 43 other states that are doing this completely fine. I'm going to read some numbers to show you that the program is extremely sustainable and helping people who need the most help. The Attorney General's letter addresses some common sense but surface level concerns. I'm going to quickly read some quotes directly from the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. At a time when this country was thinking more about sustainable mortgage products than they ever had in the history. This is a major concern. It led to the recession. CDFIs provide mortgage loans that generally employ underwriting guidelines tailored to the needs of low to moderate income consumers. Unlike creditors that rely on industry-wide underwriting guidelines, which generally do not account for the unique credit characteristics of LMI consumers, CDFI underwriting requirements include a variety of compensating factors. I'm paraphrasing some of this, but I can send you all of it. The CFPB understands that creditors with the CDFI designation typically exchange in lengthy underwriting process that is specifically tailored to the needs of these consumers by incorporating a variety of compensating factors. Finally, commentators confirm that these creditors serve consumers that have difficulty in obtaining responsible and affordable credit, and that the burdens imposed by the ability to repay requirements would significantly impair the ability of these creditors to consider serving the market. So this is helping underserved communities at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Kipke or Mr. McKay? Oh. Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I'm very interested in this because I can see the virtue of what it tries to do. So my question is, do we know from the 43 states' practices, what is the average default rate for these loans?
So these are Q4 2022, and these are 90-day late. So take all of the pools of mortgages that are not currently 90 days late on their mortgage is considered in default. For Fannie Mae and loans, it is 0.65%. For FHA, it is 3.62%. Change Lending is a nationwide CDFI that does a ton of these types of products. They're at 0.42%. These default less often than Fannie Mae loans do.
Delegate Ahrens.
Okay, just to follow up on that, can you give me an idea why that, because that doesn't make sense when you listen to it, that we're going to not check a criteria that's a box that we check on my mortgage, but this seems to be a better payback.
No doubt. So there's a box that is not being checked, but there are other boxes that are. Exactly what those boxes are can vary. The most common, though, is a heavy reliance on rental history. And kind of fits a very common argument you hear from potential homeowners from underserved communities. If I can pay my rent and my rent is the same or close to my mortgage, how can you tell me I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage? So they get a VOR, as verification of rent, that goes back 2 years, showing that they're making it on time every month. There's also software now that can scan bank statements and showing the amount coming out every single month, so it's verifiable, which is used in circumstances where the landlord might be an individual as opposed to a corporation that's just a little shakier when you get it from an individual.
So you, as a mortgage broker, you look at that criteria personally when you're reviewing the types of loans?
Well, I'm not, because I can't originate them in Maryland. Okay. But it is something that would be in these circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the bill and for the explanation. I think what I find most intriguing is it's sort of bringing the human factor back into looking at these loans, and when you use the phrases compensating factors, you know, it's taking it away from this automated world of you don't check all the right things, so you get a no. So would you say that this is really looking at each individual borrower and their particular situation in a much better way?
That's absolutely correct. The underwriting process does take longer and is more nuanced because of that. It can't just spit out an automated result. What I would compare it most to, and I don't have the numbers for VA financing in front of me, but of the widely adopted programs that are available nationwide, VA is really the only other product that establishes that level of common sense. And VA loans also have incredibly low default rates, despite sometimes coloring a little bit outside of the box.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Delegate Kipke or Mr. McKay? Delegate Pippy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Kipke, good to see you. Just a technical question. I'm reading through the bill. So I didn't realize there's a lot of current requirements for individuals before they can be issued a mortgage. And so this looks like it strikes all those, right? So I mean, by just bracketing out and then adding the designated as a community development financial, they're exempted from all of those requirements. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I needed to know. Okay.
And it is a heavy burden, and it's one that the CFPB did not take lightly when granting the exception. And I just want to phrase it in a way where it's not like removing stuff without thinking about it. The requirements and obligations of a CDFI to serve the communities are extensive as a baseline for them to exist.
Right, and so that's the point, is that in order to qualify under a community development financial institution, they have their own rigorous requirements and that's the emphasis here, is that because they're satisfying those requirements, there's no need to then add on top of it all these other.
That's correct. They're the good guys. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other further questions for the panel? Seeing none, there was one listed unfavorable, but they are not present, so unless they are here, that would conclude the hearings on Bill 400. Thank you, Delegate Kipke.
Thank you.
Members, up next, we have House Bill 473, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, and we also have with us members from ENT, Vice Chair Dana Stein, and Delegate Morgan. Welcome. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. This is a great honor to be here before you today. This is the first time testifying in this committee as a member of this committee, so I'm excited to be here. Please be gentle. I'm here to present to you House Bill 473, which is an air monitoring program. Essentially, this is a program that is modeled after what St. Mary's County does, and it puts air monitoring sensors in various parts of the state, and particularly disadvantaged communities that are susceptible to dirtier air and higher air particles that make breathing and, in some cases, drinking more dangerous. And essentially what the bill does is it tries to kind of draw the trifecta between public health and what's going on in the environment when it comes to some degree, climate change, but more just air pollution. And air pollution when it comes to measuring the particles, measuring the water and the dilution of what happens with water and dilution of particles. And it essentially is the very first step. It's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. So what we want to do is try and figure out what neighborhoods, what areas around the state are particularly susceptible and have very dirty air, and identify those areas from a very macro perspective, and then through a series of opportunities, look a little deeper to try and figure out why those particular areas, those particular neighborhoods have those issues, and then have that addressed at some point in the future when we have a better idea of exactly what those issues are. This would be run by MDE, and I'm happy to talk in as much detail as you want about the bill, but again, this is something that St. Mary's County has had a lot of success with, and we have St. Mary's County, Dr. Brewster is here to talk about the program that she helped to deploy, and I think she can speak to the deployment of this particular program in St. Mary's County and how it's helped. Again, this is kind of public health coming together with pollution to try and figure out how to just make Maryland a cleaner place for ourselves and our kids.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Respected members of the committee, I appreciate your time. My name is Mina Brewster. I'm the County Health Officer for St. Mary's County, and I'm here as our agency has submitted a letter of interest on the House Bill 473. I'm also here to provide some information about Breathe Well St. Mary's, which is an initiative that Delegate Fraser Hidalgo was just describing. The Breathe Well St. Mary's initiative was launched in 2021 through a partnership and equity task force that was formed through our health department, sheriff's office, and public schools. The initiative addresses both indoor and outdoor air quality as it relates to health. And the primary driving forces for this initiative were the high rates of asthma in our children that was leading to high utilization of our emergency departments, missed days of school, and missed days of work, in particular for the parents of those children who would then need to stay home and care for those children. We recognize that air quality plays a significant role in the control of asthma and other respiratory illnesses. Unfortunately, our residents in St. Mary's County did not have access to local air quality data. The monitors that were implemented through the MDE EPA partnership did not include any sensors in St. Mary's County. So in order to address asthma for the health, educational, and economic benefits that are involved, there are multiple strategies. The one we deployed in particular through this Breathe Well St. Mary's initiative was the installation of air quality sensors on all public schools throughout the county. This gave us good geographic distribution and penetration into multiple communities in our county. We then had that data from those air quality sensors on all public schools, and as well as some other public buildings, transmitted to a real-time data dashboard that the community could utilize and consult.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our panel? Delegate Sample Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for the bill. We actually had this on the Eastern Shore in some areas regarding the poultry industry. There was concerns about the air quality. But they were able to partner with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and they've been getting the data not only from the Eastern Shore, but also in Baltimore City as well. So for your witness, and forgive me if I don't have your name in front of me, but can you just expound upon, you were saying that St. Mary's County has it attached at the schools, correct? As a result of that, how do you foresee, or have they already done so, made any changes if there were troubling statistics from the data there at the schools?
Yeah, excellent question, and thank you so much for that question. You know, the purpose of this is to give people the information that they can make daily protective health decisions for themselves and their children. We were particularly concerned about schools because, of course, we have children outside at recess making decisions throughout the day, and we recognize that asthma exacerbations were leading to missed time from school, send-outs from school, et cetera. And so we wanted the children and in those classrooms and wanted those parents to be able to consult the data from the dashboard we have publicly available, check the air quality index for that date based upon the data being transmitted by the sensors, and advise their children as to whether today is a good day to do outdoor recess or to do indoor play. Or is it better to wear a mask outside if you're going to be outdoors because of the air quality might be exacerbating to their asthma? So yes, we have parents that are utilizing this data on a daily basis to help inform those decisions. We have school educators utilizing this dashboard as an educational tool for their classrooms, especially in their science curriculum and teaching about environmental quality, environmental health education curriculum. So it's been very useful. We installed them in our in our public schools, but we've had non-public schools reach out to us as well to implement curriculum based upon that data dashboard that we now have available in our county.
Okay, and one last question for you. I know in the fiscal note it indicates that these devices can range anywhere from $250 to about $41,000. Are you familiar with, was it the gold standard that the school has for this particular jurisdiction?
So there's a wonderful, there are different sensors available. I'm not here to promote a particular product, but the ones that we used in St. Mary's for the schools were ones called purple air sensors. And those are very reliable. We've seen them to be very reliable in the couple of years we've had them. Low-cost air sensors. We have 3 sensors installed at each of the public schools. We also have them installed at St. Mary's College of Maryland, and in addition, a few other public buildings. That allows us, if one sensor goes out, we still have data being transmitted by the others. And it allows us to get an average of the 3 sensor readings. The cost for this initiative was about between $20,000 and $30,000. I can go back and get exact numbers if it's of interest to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Queen?
Sorry, that's changed. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So my question, I have a couple of questions, and one for the intent of the bill as well as getting more detail about the cost and who pays for it. So the intent of the bill is that MDE will work with all the counties to set up some programs, so it could be at schools or wherever you think you deem necessary, but it would be county by county to decide that with MDE?
Yeah, essentially, MDE would work, and it would be in economically disadvantaged fence line communities.
Okay, so it would have to
that
be-
is where that is where this would be concentrated on. And as far as the sensors are concerned, our intent or thought was that we would be looking at the very low-cost sensors. At least that's what we would work with MDE, because the objective here is to just kind of get a baseline of what we're dealing with. And once we have the basic information, and the community has the basic information, and the public health people have the basic information, all those experts can come together and try and figure out, okay, why is it high in this particular place? What can we do about it? And so the first part is just identifying that with scientific data, and then drilling down as we learn more. But right now, we just have a bunch of theories, and we don't have the scientific data to support said theories, which is exactly what St. Mary's County is looking to address.
Okay, so my next question gets around the cost and who pays for this. So is this a program that EPA helps to fund? Are you able to get money from EPA?
We weren't, at the time we were looking into it. The EPA accepted sensors, the ones that the MDE have already on their network. I think they have 24 sensors throughout the state. Those are much higher in cost. We, at that time, we made the decision not to go for that high cost. We consulted with experts in this area through University of Maryland, as well as expertise from St. Mary's College of Maryland, and determined that the low-cost sensors were adequate for our purposes, and they've been working well for us.
Okay, so EPA does provide funding, but it's for particular types of sensors?
I don't know if EPA currently
Okay, so
provides
we
funding. At the
don't
time
know
we
at
were
all.
looking, we weren't able to
Okay.
identify funding source.
Okay, that's fine. And so the,
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, he was just asking if I could explain how we funded it. So we have seen air quality as being influential in outcomes related to COVID-19 infection. At that time, when this was being implemented, we were starting to learn more and more about long COVID or post-COVID conditions, as we call it now, and the impact that air quality has on ongoing respiratory conditions related to post-COVID conditions. Because of its association with COVID, we were able to use some of the federal CARES Act dollars that came in to implement this initiative. Our costs were primarily around the air quality sensors, and I listed those a little bit. We did have some other sensors that we implemented in indoor settings in some of our public safety buildings, and those were a separate cost. And we also had a cost of about $20,000 to build out the data dashboard and to set up the automated data updates. So those were one-time costs. If there's periodic maintenance costs that might come from the data dashboard, that's fairly low.
okay, so is the intent for the sponsor, again, that we would try to find some federal dollars to offset the costs to the counties?
Absolutely. So
Okay.
there's a couple of pieces here. There's federal dollars, and we do have a meeting with MDE to talk with them about the fiscal note and figuring out how to get that down significantly, because I'm of the opinion that it's a little high, to say the least. But to work on getting it down and work on finding out diverse ways to help pay for these sensors. And there are a lot of ways we can look at, in some of the cases, the blueprint that St. Mary's County did, what they did as far as their software, what they did as far as gathering. They are ahead of the curve. So there's a lot of work that's already been done, and some of that can be used as a blueprint, which is not reflective in the fiscal note in any way whatsoever. What's also not necessarily reflected in the fiscal note, when we talk about asthma-related issues, public health issues, emergency room visit issues, all the public health that goes along with it, there's an ounce of cure that prevents, well, you know the saying. So it's to some degree, as far as the fiscal note is concerned, Delegate, it's about moving zeros and ones, and let's just try to keep our kids and our citizens healthy from the beginning, as opposed to spending lots and lots of money trying to fix what we participated in one way or another of making them ill. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, MDE, well, we know that in many areas that communities were built around industry. That's just, how we formed the union. So those areas, and I'm going to zoning on here, those areas where an industry may be zoned appropriately for that, but then right across the street could very well be a residential community.
That's correct.
And so MDE, when a asphalt batching plant, puts in for a permit, they may be zoned appropriately through the local zoning for that area, but MDE then will most likely grant them that permit. If by chance we have these monitors and they're there in that area and they see that this particular area has a very high level of particulate matter going in, and it's determined that it is very hazardous, I guess you could say, to individuals' health. Do you anticipate that perhaps MDE may say, well, no, we can't allow this permit, and then there be like legal action from the particular industry?
Yes. Specifically, it's a great question. It's a brilliant question, because that's exactly what this bill is designed to do. It's designed to gather the data so that we can have objective scientific data and we can make decisions based on science, and particularly in those lower income neighborhoods that have already been disadvantaged, and in some cases being disadvantaged again and again and again. Once that data is acquired, and we can sift through that data and get more data and better understand what's going on in those neighborhoods, then MDE will have to address whether there are permits that should be issued for that asphalt factory or whatever it may be, because that's, it's all about just grabbing the data, getting the science, and then once you understand what's going on, protecting people, particular people that are vulnerable and have already been victimized multiple times.
Because in one area, you could very well have an asphalt batching plant, you can have a concrete batching plant, you can have the people who, provide stone for your beautiful patios.
And a bus depot.
Yeah, all of that. So with that, I lost my train of thought with the last question, so I guess I probably didn't need to ask it. So,
well, the fact that you asked,
they'll be working, then I would assume then the MDE would probably work with the local county or whatever to deal with maybe some of their zoning issues and to ensure that, well, at least one would hope.
Yeah, where there's jurisdictions from MDE, they would be working to ensure that future decisions that impact people's public health are not made in a negative impact. And I would say your questions are extraordinarily astute, and I'm going to assume that's because you served on the Environment and Transportation Committee prior to this committee. So thank you.
Well, you can assume that. However, I had a very real situation when I served on the Prince George's County Council in my district, and so I know very well in the concerns. And then, being a legislator, you have to do that which is already prescribed in law versus what may be. So thank you very much.
And then trying to balance what's actually the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate Harrison. Delegate Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Temporary
Delegate
Chairwoman.
Fisher, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I can't wait for this question.
It's a good one. It's a good one. The bill says the department shall prioritize overburdened communities. How do we define overburdened?
Okay, so the program will prioritize the placement of monitors in a census tract with a median income of 80% of the statewide median income. So basically, poorer neighborhoods, people that make less money are going to be prioritized.
Well, it says underserved communities as well. It says overburdened communities and underserved. So I think that you just referenced underserved, I'm guessing.
Right.
What is overburdened?
It is in, let me just check.
I was looking for it. I did not find the definition. I was hoping we could figure that out.
Overburdened communities as meaning stated in 1701 of the article, which is I can't find it for you off the top of my head, but it's in here.
Okay.
Because I
Yeah, they
read it
referenced the
earlier.
article, and I did not look
Right,
at the article.
701.
I did not look up the article, so I thought maybe you know it off.
Yeah, we also had Dr. Wilson, but I don't think that he made it. I think he was going to try to be virtual.
He will be virtual.
Okay, well, he could probably answer that question because
Got
Dr.
it.
Jacoby Wilson is the director of the University of Maryland Center for Engagement.
And
Is that-
I guess, go ahead,
Oh,
I'm
you
sorry.
did?
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, we consulted with him for this
Dr.
Breathe Well
Wilson.
St. Mary's initiative.
And you've probably seen Dr. Wilson in the committee before. He's a specialist in this kind of area, so he can answer that question. But I'm not sure if he's here virtually, Madam Chair, or not.
He is here
Okay.
virtually.
So my other question is for the doctor in the House, and that is, so you put the sensors, you use sensors in St. Mary's County, you put them mostly at schools?
We have them at schools, we have them at St. Mary's College of Maryland, we have them at certain public agencies, the Sheriff's Office building,
And they're
two of their
outside?
buildings, outside.
They're all outside
These are the outdoor ones. We do have an indoor air quality component to our initiative, which I didn't describe.
Okay. So the outside sensors were measuring what?
So the purple air sensors measure particulate matter, 2.5, which is what's most concerning for respiratory conditions like asthma. Although generally we're concerned about particulate matter 10 and below, 2.5 are the ones that we're
What's the
particularly
industry in
concerned
St.
about.
Mary's County that's causing the pollution?
I'm sorry?
What industry is there in St. Mary's County that's causing
So
the pollution?
there's a variety of reasons for particulate matter. I mean, it could be vehicle exhaust, it could be the idling of
Because I'm
school
not
buses.
aware of any industry being in St. Mary's County, that's why I was asking the question.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a factory or an industry. It could be due to car exhaust fumes. It could be due to mold, pollen, various things circulating in
And
the
one of your
air.
suggestions is that when you find high particulate matter, that children should wear masks irrespective. COVID out the door for a minute, but like if there was high particulate matter and when
So
you're
what
measuring, you
happens
want
is
them to
the
wear
data
masks.
is translated to what's called an air quality index. And this is a fairly standard, I don't know if you've seen those charts before where they have different colors and there's different air quality indices. And then depending on what your risk factors are, if you are a child with asthma or an older person with COPD or somebody with some other underlying respiratory condition, for example, then it would make sense for you to take protective health actions if the air quality index is at a level that could be a risk for your respiratory
So
condition.
there would be a suggestion that some children wear masks then.
So
what I
that's a very valid thing to do because certain types of masks like N95s and KN95s and so forth will provide protection from particulate matter when you're in an outdoor environment
So my
and
other- go
you
ahead, I'm
are
sorry.
at risk for an asthma exacerbation. The alternative, of course, is to not go outside and have outdoor recess. There are indoor recess that is made available to children when they need it.
And in St. Mary's County, to what extent are asthma cases in particular caused by, or breathing issues, certainly in children, caused by the indoor air quality, which is not being
Yeah,
measured
that's a
inside
great
of
point.
people's
Indoor
homes.
air quality is a significant contributor as well to asthma exacerbations, you're right.
So this bill won't measure that though, will it?
Well, I'm not familiar if this bill has an indoor air quality component. Our Breathe Well St. Mary's initiative does have an indoor air quality component.
But not for people's houses. So my question is, and this is my last one, so thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate the latitude. It's really, if you're collecting air quality outside in any given area, and in your case, it's countywide, which is, certainly a model to look at, and
you're saying, well, there are high cases of asthma here or there. It's actually, the data is really not going to be that accurate because much of it could be caused by indoor air quality, which is not being measured.
I don't think our data is to identify the rate of asthma. The data is there to give people the ability to make protective health decisions, at least in our case, and in St. Mary's County. That was the purpose
I was
of.
just referring to the bill versus, so, yeah, and I get what you're trying to do, Delegate. I understand completely. I'm just saying that I'm wondering how accurate data is going to be, because look, I'll be the first to admit, I'm renting a house in Annapolis during session, and the air quality is awful, right? Because I have hot water heat at my house, and I don't have the forced air. So that in and of itself makes you sicker quicker, so I get that. So I'm just not necessarily sure.
So what I would say to answer your question, what I would say is, as we gather the data that suggests that there is an issue, then more expertise and better equipment can be brought in to more well identify the source and come up with solutions to deal with it. And I think that you are correct. People have air filtration systems in their offices, in their homes. They run them in their furnaces. But at some point, you have to kind of figure out, well, where is it? Is it outside? Is it inside? I think this doesn't, while may not address the inside, addresses the outside. And where we find issues, it's, again, the...
Thank you. Thank you.
So.
Thank you. Delegate Howard.
Madam Chair, so this is for anybody, but we've been doing this for years in Maryland, just on the state level. I mean, I remember watching the news and seeing air quality index indicators being reported widely. I mean, it just seems like it's more at a statewide level, and it seems like you're trying to get down a little bit into the ints and make it a little bit more localized. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and particularly vulnerable communities where we already have great concerns that poor decisions were made, and let's try to verify or confirm whether that's indeed the case.
I know for a fact that this has been going on because my grandparents used to use that air quality index that they would report on, Fox 45 or whatever, and they would make decisions on going out, and my grandfather had some respiratory problems, so they would make some decisions based on that information. But you're just trying to do it a little bit more of a localized level.
Yeah. What we're trying to do is not just gather the heat data, like the red days, the hot days,
pollen and that type of stuff,
but
right?
also, what are the other areas, and are they really hyper-local in certain neighborhoods? Because that's what we've been hearing year over year, but we don't necessarily have the proof to support that.
I would agree. We've heard that testimony like that in this committee. I've been here 9 years. We've heard it almost every year.
Right.
So, okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Madam Chair, we do have Dr. Wilson, who's a specialist.
I do have the list of
Okay.
witnesses. Are there any further questions for this Delegate Weigel?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could you comment on MDE's letter that they would like to develop their own strategy in lieu of implementing the requirements of this bill?
Sure. That's one of the things that we have scheduled to talk with them about. We actually have a meeting on the books with MDE to talk with them about what that may or may not look like. I do know that MDE is in the process of pretty significant change from a new administration's perspective. So we welcome that conversation to see what their thoughts are. But to this date, they haven't put forward a concrete plan that I'm aware of. So we do have a conversation with them scheduled to talk with them about this and try and figure out what it looks like moving forward, whether we need to amend this in some way, see what their plan is. Our plan, again, comes out of, I think, Washington State and particularly St. Mary's County. I'm sorry, I went to St. Mary's College. So when you said St. Mary's College, it's like my whole brain keeps thinking about the college. And so,
Good times, huh?
yeah, all the wonderful times on those big sailing vessels. So, yeah, so we do have a conversation with them scheduled to kind of see where they are. I do know that they're hiring up a lot of people. The Department of Environment is doing a lot, so I'm not quite sure exactly where this is on their list.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize, Delegate Fair. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just going to take care of the virtuals after all our in-person witnesses.
Yeah, and I'm sorry too, Madam Chair. He's actually part of my primary panel and could answer some of these questions, which is why I wanted him to go. But I didn't know that he was
welcome to come up. You could
well,
have
he's
said.
not. I think he's virtual.
I meant you could have said. So
yes, I could have, and I'm sorry. That's my fault.
Any other questions for this panel?
There he is.
Oh, okay. Dr. Wilson.
Yes, hello. Yeah, sorry I've not been able to be there virtually, but do you want me to respond to some of the questions or just wait, just go ahead and go give my 2 minutes?
Did
What
you
would be the
have your
best approach?
presentation?
I was just to give comments.
Sure, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. Is the clock up? Okay, cool, thank you. So thank you for this time, committee. My name is Dr. Jacoby Wilson. As Delegate Fraser Hidalgo mentioned, that I am one of the experts on these issues. So I would just like to lay out a few of the benefits of this particular bill, and I support it with amendments. So as the state of particular matter is a major contributor to asthma, it's a combustion byproduct when we burn fossil fuels. You have sources that are both stationary and non-stationary mobile sources. The term we use when we look at non-stationary sources, we call it traffic-related air pollution. So if you think about buses, commuter vehicles, they're a major source of particulate matter. Particulate matter comes in 3 forms, 3 sizes: PM10, which is 10 microns in diameter; 2.5, which is 2.5 microns in diameter; and PM1, which is the 1 micron diameter. 2.5 is regulated under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the NAAQS. You also have other criteria, air pollutants beside particulate matter that are concerned for public health. But the 2.5 is very important because it can cause asthma attacks, elevate your blood pressure, cause cancer, increase birth defects, infant mortality rates, also lead to premature mortality and impact life expectancy. So there are other pollutants as well that are important to take into account, like nitrogen dioxide, that also is a combustion byproduct from burning fossil fuels. And for me, the amendments that I'd like to see are really around how we use the data, and going beyond just particulate matter, including NO2 would be important. Also, maybe even volatile organic compounds would be important because those are also combustion byproducts, and the fit for purpose of the data. From an education perspective, I think we're there, but I think there's opportunities to go beyond permitting and using this data to inform investments of funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And I'll stop talking, but I'll add more when I get questions, if there's opportunities for questions. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would it be possible for Dr. Wilson to address Delegate Fisher's question about overburden?
Yes.
Yes, so thank you for that question. So my team helped develop the definition of overburden that's been used in multiple bills. I believe also some of the bills this session, also last year. So if you go to the bill, the definition of overburden, hold on 1 second. We have a certain number of indicators. So let me get to the indicators. So overburden is defined as any census tract for which 3 or more of the following environmental health indicators are above the 75th percentile statewide. So you have air quality indicators such as particulate matter, ozone. You have the National Air Toxic Assessment, diesel particulate matter, cancer risk, respiratory hazard, traffic proximity, lead paint indicator, national priorities list for Superfund sites, risk management plan facility proximity, hazardous waste proximity, wastewater, there's a wastewater discharge indicator, proximity to a concentrated animal feeding operation, percent of the population lacking broadband coverage, asthma emergency room discharges, myocardial infarction discharges, low birth weight infants, proximity to power plants that are emitting pollutants, proximity to a toxic release inventory facility, proximity to a brownfield site, proximity to a mining operation, and proximity to a hazardous waste landfill. So you have to be 3 or more of those, and you'll be counted as being overburdened. So these are the indicators that are listed in the bill.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Are there any additional questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Wilson, and thank you to the panelists here, and I'll be calling up your next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Call on Emily Ranson, Rosa Hance, John O'Connor, and Japan Balja.
Actually, Japan was registering me in, so I think I would do.
Is John O'Connor here? Going once, twice? Okay.
All right, good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 473. This style of air quality monitoring would be an effective way of getting the air quality data that we all need to make our various health decisions, and also asks MDE to consider this data in their issuing of new and updated permits. Outside of St. Mary's County, there's also a similar air quality network in the town of Cheverly, which is partnered with the University of Maryland School of Public Health for this type of hyperlocal monitoring network. This bill also bakes in a fair amount of public consultation, public outreach, working with the Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities, and also works with the Air Quality Control Advisory Council in order to do a study and make recommendations about ambient air quality monitoring moving forward. So we are here in support of the bill, urge a favorable report, and appreciate the delegate submitting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hance?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo for introducing this bill and for this wonderful community for the opportunity to testify in support of HB 473. My name is Rosa Hance. I'm the chair of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club, and I'm proud to represent them today, our 70,000 members and supporters in strong support of this bill. Air pollution is an environmental health hazard. And the air quality alerts that were discussed before, and I've really enjoyed this discussion, are in fact based on computer modeling and not real-time local on-the-ground data. I think we can all appreciate the difference between an air monitor that is, 50 miles away from us, possibly, in an obscure location, only 24 across the entire state. And they're not in every county, as you might notice, right? Before the Breathe Well St. Mary's program happened, there were 0 in St. Mary's County. I'm also a St. Mary's County resident. And years ago, actually 14 different local groups partnered with the Sierra Club and NAACP to put forth proposals in front of St. Mary's County and Charles County and promote the concept of the low-cost, high-value air quality monitor. We're so thrilled and thankful and grateful to the Equity Task Force and the St. Mary's County Health Department for installing them, and believe that the bill that is proposed today really takes, not only takes this and moves it statewide, but prioritizes it correctly, because the low-income communities that would be receiving the bill, the air monitors first, it's also using the same definitions for overburdened and underserved as the Climate Solutions Now Act to ensure that the people who are impacted by air pollution are the ones that are going to see the results of this data first. I urge a favorable report, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for these panelists? Delegate Fisher.
Thank you. The young lady for the Sierra Club, I just wanted to clarify, you folks still don't support nuclear energy at the Sierra Club? I'm just making sure that that's the case with respect to the RPS.
So I'll take this opportunity to comment on the air quality concerns that are on the ground in the related area to the Calvert Nuclear Facility. As a local resident only at the moment, people are very concerned about the proximity between a nuclear power plant and a gas import-export facility. And so local constituents would very much appreciate the opportunity to monitor the air in those impacted communities.
My question was, that was a crafty answer, but my question was, does the Sierra Club, yes or no, support nuclear energy as a clean energy source?
Delegate Fisher, if we could keep the questions to the content of the bill and not the RPS, that would be.
But it does go to clean air, because what I heard was a natural gas plant, and then and I heard you basically criticizing nuclear, which I just don't understand.
I'm speaking on the topic of air pollution and of the concerns of air pollution today. Thanks very much.
Your non-answer is received. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for these ladies, for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much for testifying before us this afternoon.
Quite welcome. Thank you.
We will now move to our virtual witnesses, Ms. Gabby Ross and Ms. Gwen Dubois.
Hi, can you all see me okay and hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity today to submit testimony in favor of HB 473 on behalf of Asty Coastal Trust and our co-signees today. I want to take this time to mention that establishing statewide ambient air monitors is crucial for us to study the current health impacts that are plaguing our citizens. From the populations in industrial areas of Baltimore to the CAFO impacted communities of the Eastern Shore, identifying known sources of pollution and using that data to better regulate permits within the state should be our utmost priority this legislative session. Maryland is facing a crucial time where we are under threat from fake green energy schemes that are going to be placed in our most vulnerable communities. Collecting this data will be crucial before any new businesses can be permitted throughout the state. Our cries of better air regulations and monitoring have fallen on deaf ears for years in the legislature. We are thankful that delegates Fraser Hidalgo, Charcuti, and Love are championing this bill this year. By requiring the state to reestablish and strengthen this ambient air monitoring, communities can begin to breathe a sigh of relief knowing that their health and well-being is utmost priority and the data collected will be publicly available. I also want to address something that Delegate Cherie Sample-Hughes said earlier regarding air monitors on the Eastern Shore. There were a few air monitors placed in questionable areas, but it was not a study. It was a white paper that was produced by the Delmarva Land and Litter Collaborative. And the only results of that paper were that we need more air monitors and that we don't know what's happening for the communities that live close to these CAFOs, these concentrated animal feeding operations on the shore. So, you know, ACT has done a few studies ourselves and working with collaborative partners about this. And, you know, these were questions that we had 8 years ago. What are air emissions doing to our community members? What kind of health impacts are there regarding air monitors and CAFOs? And why are so many people in the state plagued with asthma and COPD and several different types of cancers? So I do want to address that, and hopefully that answers some questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the panel. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Are there any questions? Delegate Adams.
Thank you to is it Gabby? I'm having a hard time
Yes, Gabby
seeing.
Ross.
Okay, so the delegate who asked that question earlier is not in the room, but I'm here, and I know that this was not only a good faith effort between industry partners and folks that live on the shore, but they did this independently without coercion. They did it for the purpose of confirming and making sure that issues aren't there. Now, this isn't directly on the bill, and I'll ask a question just to follow protocol here, but it's for all the good reasons that you would want something like this, that happened on the shore, not to create a white paper and to disparage the industry, who was a strong participant in this. And frankly, the data that's out there is available, and I could share it with the committee, but it illustrates, at least at some level, a different outcome than what you were suggesting. And I'll allow you to respond, but I wanted to stand firm to support what was happening on the shore and not have our industry disparaged. Thank you.
Okay. I guess.
Can I respond?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the question. Well, just to kind of be a little bit more concise, so a white paper was produced and it identified several research questions that several of us a number of years ago, when we produced a bill called the Community Healthy Air Act, we're trying to identify 8 years ago. And if anything, the white paper only produced more questions and ultimately the need for more air monitoring on the shore. So regardless of the chicken industry or regardless of, what we know right now, the question still remains that we still do not know what kind of health impacts are are happening to our community members. And I'm going to just specifically speak for the shore because I don't live in Baltimore. I live on the shore. And the other thing that you mentioned is that it was a collaborative effort. However, there was a lot of different stakeholders that were not included in that collaborative effort. That have been researching this and have been questioning and have been demanding answers for a very long time. So if anything, we're very favorable that just the state of Maryland produces its own study that's not industry funded and can focus on just producing air quality monitorings in these underserved and overburdened communities. That way we can identify multiple sources of air pollution in the state.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Are there any additional questions for this panelist? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our last virtual panelist is Ms. Gwen Dubois.
Hi, if you can put my monitor on, that's okay. I'm in my video, but
We need to see
I'm Dr.
you.
Gwen Dubois. I'm the host.
Ms. Dubois,
okay.
can we see you? This is for the record.
I'm trying to. There
Oh,
you go. Okay. So I'm Dr. Gwen Dubois, a primary care physician for many decades and president of Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility. I learned about PM and other pollutants about 25 years ago when studying for my master's in public health. Curtis Bay was a neighborhood I became acquainted with because it had the largest medical waste incinerator in the country. But the incinerator was just the tip of the pollution iceberg for this community. There's coal ash, coal dust, multiple chemical companies, as well as incinerators, and all the dirty emissions from truck traffic. Curtis Bay was once number 8 in the nation for stationary sources of air pollution and had no air monitors. In 2013, an article from MIT reported that of 20 major cities, Baltimore was number 1 in the highest total mortality rate attributable to PM 2.5. And then in 2015, the Environmental Integrity Project, EIP, did a short study in Curtis Bay with their own air monitors and found that PM 2.5 levels were as much as 23% higher than the average readings in the nearest MDE monitor. EIP recommended MDE install a PM 2.5 monitor nearby outside of the Curtis Bay Recreation Center where young children who are especially vulnerable play. Here we are 7 years later and no monitors. That's why I'm testifying today for families in Curtis Bay and other similar communities who deserve to be able to raise their children where it's safe to breathe the air. The smaller PM size, the more dangerous it is for human health, because when we breathe it, they evade the normal defenses like mucus and cough, and we can't keep it from getting deep inside our lungs. And it even goes into the bloodstream and gets carried around the rest of the body. Particulate matter are like toxic delivery vehicles because they carry their cargo, heavy metals, organic chemicals, and viruses like COVID-19 virus into our bodies where they deliver the cargo to do harm. Recent study linked COVID-19 mortality to PM 2.5 levels. Health effects, lung diseases, heart attacks, aggravation of asthma, increase in hospital admission, and deaths from cardiovascular and respiratory disease and from lung cancer. We should pass this bill and give some help to neighbors so they can protect their children and live where it's safe to breathe the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dubois. Are there any questions for
Dr. Dubois.
Dr. Dubois, I apologize for this panelist.
I'm supposed to have Dr. Brewster. Good to see you again.
Oh, okay. Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 473. Members, I've been tasked, that concludes our bill hearings for the afternoon, but I've been tasked to remind members of our 6:30 event. If you need the venue, we can take that offline.